5 divers were repairing an underwater oil pipeline when a sudden and powerful suction force appeared, dragging them deep into the dark and narrow pipeline. Although they were lucky to survive, they became trapped inside a tiny air pocket. One suffered a broken leg, while others had sprained limbs. Even worse, they had lost their oxygen tanks and completely lost contact with the outside world. Driven by the instinct to survive, they fought desperately to save themselves in the face of hopelessness. And this is the story of the Paria pipeline tragedy. The incident took place in the waters near the town of Point Pierre in Trinidad and Tobago. Multiple oil pipelines had been laid across the seabed in this area. The accident occurred inside pipeline number 4. The pipeline had a diameter of only 76 centimeters and was designed in a U-shape. The deepest section of the pipe was about 15 meters below the surface, while the straight line distance between both ends was approximately 365 meters. When the pipeline was in operation, oil tankers would dock at berth number 5 on the right side. The oil would then be transported through the underwater pipeline to berth number 6 on the left side, where it was finally pumped into the refinery. On February 25, 2022, 5 divers were hired by an oil company. Their mission was to enter the long shutdown pipeline number 4, remove the plug at berth number 6, and weld an extension pipe onto it, so the pipeline could resume normal operation. The 5 divers were Budrum, Ali, Henry, Nagasser, and Kerbin. The youngest was 31 years old, while the oldest was 57. At 2:45 p.m. that afternoon, the 5 men geared up and descended through a diving bell to the pipeline entrance at berth number 6. Speaking of the diving bell, here's a quick explanation. Its principle is similar to an upside-down cup submerged underwater. Air is continuously supplied from the surface through a hose, creating a relatively dry and breathable underwater workspace for divers. The seemingly safe environment inside the diving bell caused Budrum and the others to lower their guard. They all removed their diving gear so they could work more easily while removing the pipe plug. But what they didn't know was that, after pipeline number 4 had recently been drained of oil, the air pressure inside the pipeline had become far lower than the pressure outside. The moment the plug at berth number 6 was removed, the massive pressure difference instantly sucked all 5 divers, along with huge amounts of seawater, deep into the pipeline. They were tossed around inside the pipe, like clothes inside a spinning washing machine, violently rotating and smashing into the walls. The entire ordeal lasted about 90 seconds. When the water finally became still, the pipeline was filled with a mixture of oil and seawater, surrounded by absolute darkness, where they could barely see each other. Although all 5 men had lost their oxygen tanks during the violent impacts, they were incredibly still alive. This was because the pipeline had been laid across an uneven seabed, creating slight bends and curves. As seawater flooded into the pipe, air pockets formed in the raised sections of the pipeline. By sheer luck, the 5 divers came to a stop precisely inside one of those air pockets. When the current finally settled, at that moment, they were crammed tightly together inside the narrow pipeline, their heads and feet pressed against one another. Darkness swallowed everything around them. The only way they could confirm each other was alive was by shouting through the pipe. Budrum was trapped at the very front, followed by Ali, Henry, Nagasser, and finally Kerbin. Each of the men suffered different levels of injuries, but the most seriously hurt was Ali, who was trapped in the second position. His leg had been badly broken when he was sucked into the pipeline. Every movement caused unbearable pain. Inside the air pocket, the sharp smell of oil mixed with seawater filled the cramped space. The fear lurking in the darkness felt as cold as the ocean itself, slowly consuming every one of them. They had no idea whether their co-workers on the surface had even realized what had happened inside the pipeline. And it was at this moment that disagreement broke out within the group. Some believed that once the company lost contact with them, a rescue team would surely be sent. As long as they stayed where they were and kept banging on the pipeline, they would eventually be found and rescued. But others believed the air pocket was far too small. The seawater could rise again at any moment, and with so little oxygen left, they might never survive long enough for rescue to arrive. To them, their only chance of survival was to save themselves. After a heated discussion, the group finally chose self-rescue. But another terrifying problem soon emerged. When the accident happened, the violent suction inside the pipeline had spun them around so violently that none of them knew where they actually were. Not long earlier, they had removed the plug at berth number 6. That side was their only possible escape route. As for berth number 5, it had been abandoned for years, and the pipeline there had already been sealed shut. If they went the wrong direction, there would be absolutely no chance of survival. The team desperately tried to remember what it felt like when they were sucked into the pipe. In the end, they all agreed that their feet had entered first. That meant Budrum, who was positioned at the very front, was closest to the exit. Once they confirmed the direction, Budrum and the others immediately began moving. But the narrow pipeline was far too cramped for 5 people to move quickly. They could only keep their faces pressed against the air pocket above the water, their bodies linked head to foot, slowly dragging themselves forward with their elbows. No one knew how long they crawled. Eventually, Budrum, who was leading the group, suddenly stopped. Ahead of him was a section of pipeline completely submerged underwater. Without oxygen tanks, the only way through was to hold their breath and swim beneath the water. But no one knew how long the flooded section was, or whether another air pocket even existed on the other side. For a moment, the entire team hesitated. Rather than sit there waiting to die in despair, Budrum decided to take the risk. He turned back and told the others that he was going to swim forward while holding his breath. If he successfully made it through the flooded section, he would knock on the pipe wall as a signal. But if no signal came, it would mean he had died, and the others should not continue risking their lives. Staying behind and waiting for rescue might still offer a small chance of survival. At that moment, Ali, who was in the second position, decided to go with him. The 2 men then took one final deep breath before plunging headfirst into the freezing, oil-filled seawater. Budrum and Ali swam forward blindly, frantically feeling their way through the darkness. But around them, there was nothing except greasy seawater. The air pocket they hoped for never appeared. Their strength was fading rapidly, and the suffocating pressure in their lungs was becoming unbearable. Just as despair began to consume them, Budrum's hand suddenly struck a metal object. It was one of the oxygen tanks that had also been sucked into the pipeline during the accident. Driven by pure survival instinct, Budrum immediately shoved the oil-covered regulator into his mouth and took several desperate breaths before passing it back to Ali behind him. The 2 men continued crawling forward slowly, sharing a single oxygen tank. After moving some distance, Budrum miraculously discovered a second tank. With those 2 tanks, they finally managed to reach another air pocket. The moment they surfaced, Budrum began violently pounding on the pipe wall, sending a signal back to the others. Moments later, the same knocking echoed back from behind them, but Ali understood very clearly that they had only survived because of the incredible luck of finding those oxygen tanks. Henry and the other 2 men behind them had no air supply at all. There was almost no chance they could make it through such a long flooded section alive, and no one knew how much farther the escape route still was. The agony from Ali's broken leg, combined with the overwhelming psychological torment, finally pushed him to the brink of collapse. He could no longer continue with Budrum. Budrum tried his best to comfort him, but there was little else he could do. He told Ali to remain inside the air pocket and wait for rescue, promising that if he managed to find the exit, he would bring rescuers back for everyone. Carrying the last hope of his 4 trapped teammates, Budrum once again plunged into the freezing water. This flooded section was even longer and even darker than before. Just as his air supply was nearly exhausted, Budrum finally reached a bend in the pipeline. Using the last of his strength, he desperately swam upward, and when he finally burst through the surface, what he saw was not a sealed pipe plug, but the correct escape route. He immediately began pounding on the pipe walls and screaming for help. The co-workers aboard the support vessel finally discovered Budrum trapped inside the pipeline. By then, more than 2 hours had passed since all 5 divers had been sucked into the pipe. The moment he was rescued, Budrum told the rescue personnel everything that had happened inside. The other 4 men were still alive. He begged them to immediately send in a professional rescue team. After saying those words, Budrum collapsed unconscious from exhaustion. But when Budrum woke up in the hospital the next day, the news he received completely shattered him. The oil company had never sent anyone to rescue the remaining 4 divers. Their explanation was that the inside of the pipeline was far too narrow, making it impossible for rescue divers to enter while carrying oxygen tanks. And the company also claimed that the cost of dismantling the pipeline to save them was unacceptable. During that time, other divers voluntarily organized rescue attempts, but they were reportedly blocked by the oil company. Budrum himself, desperate to return and save his teammates, was allegedly restrained and locked away by the company. Over the following days, knocking sounds could still occasionally be heard, coming from inside the pipeline, but the company remained unmoved. Only after all 4 men had died did the company finally use seawater pressure to flush their bodies out of the pipeline. According to the later autopsy reports, the 4 trapped divers survived for at least 36 hours. After Budrum had already been rescued, no one can truly imagine the terror, suffering, and hopeless waiting they endured inside that narrow, pitch-black, oil-filled pipeline. After the tragedy, the families of the 4 deceased divers filed lawsuits against the company. As of today, the final court ruling has still not been announced.